In Greek mythology, there are numerous heroes, gods, and monsters. From these come some of the greatest stories ever told. However, one hero stands above the rest. Known as the strongest man who ever lived, a son of Zeus, this individual has had more stories told about him than any other hero in Greek mythology. I, of course, am talking about Hercules.
Honey, you mean Hercules!
Actually, I mean Heracles. Hercules was the Romanized version of this hero, and the more well-known name. However, the name Heracles actually holds some significance, and we'll get into that later. Hi, I'm Kit, and while there are many stories that involve Heracles, as I mentioned, today we'll be taking a look at one of the most well-known stories. A story of a hero, monsters, and a sin to atone for. And keep in mind that because this story comes from a mythology that's thousands of years old, there are multiple versions of these events. And if you do go on to enjoy the video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps out and I appreciate it a lot. Anyways, without further ado, this is the story of the Labors of Heracles. This story begins when Zeus, the king of the gods, fell in love with a mortal woman named Alcmene, who was the granddaughter of Perseus. Zeus got Alcmene pregnant while her husband, Amphitryon, was away, and he did this after tricking her by disguising himself as her husband. Amphitryon actually came home early that night and also got Alcmene pregnant. Yeah, Greek mythology gets weird. Anyways, this caused Hera, Zeus's godly wife and queen of the gods, to become angry. Before the child was born, Zeus promised that the next male descendant of Perseus would become king. Hera, however, with the help of Aletheia, the goddess of childbirth, caused Alcmene's womb to be closed, which prevented the child from being born. Eurystheus, another descendant of Perseus, was made to be born early, and he became the king of Mycenae and Tiryns. When Alcmene's child was born, he was called Heracles, meaning Hera's glory, in an attempt to appease the goddess. On the same day Heracles was born, Alcmene gave birth to Iphicles, who was the son of Amphitryon. While Heracles was a baby, Hera sent 2 snakes into his crib. He was so strong, however, that he was able to strangle both snakes, one in each hand, before they could bite him. Hera decided that if she couldn't destroy Heracles, she would make his life as miserable as possible. After he had grown, Heracles married Megara, who was the princess of Thebes. In a fit of madness induced by Hera, he killed Megara as well as his children. Afterwards, once he had come back to himself and realized what he had done, he consulted the oracle at Delphi to know how he could atone for his actions. He was instructed by the oracle to become the servant of his cousin, the king Eurystheus. Eurystheus, with the help of Hera, devised 10 labors for Heracles to accomplish that were designed to be both impossible as well as deadly, in the hopes of destroying him. Heracles' first task was to slay a lion that was terrorizing the city of Nemea. Once he found the creature, he attempted to slay it with arrows, but they bounced harmlessly off its skin, which was invulnerable. So Heracles, after cornering the lion, strangled it with his bare hands. After defeating the lion, Heracles attempted to skin it with a knife, but was unable to do so. Noticing his struggle, Athena, the goddess of wisdom, instructed him to use the lion's own claw to skin it, which worked. From then on, Heracles wore the skin of the Nemean Lion as armor. Next, Heracles was sent to slay the Hydra, which lived in the swamp near Lerna. The Hydra was a large monster with 7 serpent-like heads, one of which was actually immortal. When he confronted the Hydra, Heracles lured it out of its den by using flaming arrows. He then began to cut off its heads. However, he quickly learned that once he cut a head off, 2 more would grow in its place. He decided to ask his nephew, Augeas, for help. Augeas, possibly inspired by Athena, came up with a plan. After Heracles cut off a head, he would use a torch to cauterize the wound thus preventing the new heads from growing. When Hera saw that Heracles was winning in his fight against the Hydra, she sent a giant crab to distract him, but he was able to easily crush it under his foot. After defeating the Hydra, Heracles took the immortal head and buried it on the side of the road from Lerna to Augeas, and then put heavy rocks on top of it. He also took his arrows and dipped them in the poisonous blood of the Hydra. Eurystheus then sent Heracles to capture the Ceryneian Hind, sometimes called the Golden Hind, and bring it back to him. And a hind is a female red deer. The hind, which was a creature sacred to Artemis, the goddess of the hunt and the wild, was a female deer known for its incredible speed and golden horns. After a full year, Heracles was able to run down the hind and capture it, but had shot it in the process. Artemis was understandably unhappy with the treatment of her deer and was about to take it back from Heracles. Heracles, however, told Artemis that the oracle had instructed him to obey Eurystheus. Artemis, upon hearing this, let go of her anger, healed the deer, and allowed Heracles to bring it to Eurystheus. Heracles' next task was to capture a giant, extremely violent boar that was loose on Mount Erymanthos. It would often come down from the mountain, terrorizing the countryside, gouging both man and animals with its tusks. Heracles chased the creature through the winter snow and was eventually able to capture it by slowing it with a stab from a spear and catching it with a net. When Heracles returned with the boar over his shoulders, Eurystheus was so frightened that he hid himself in a ceramic container called a pythos. The next task was meant to be not only difficult, but humiliating as well. Heracles was sent to clean the stables of King Augeas in a single day. The stables housed immortal cattle that had been a gift to Augeas from his father, Helios, the god and personification of the sun. Heracles, not mentioning Eurystheus, told King Augeas that he would clean his stables in a single day if he paid him 1/10 of his cattle, and King Augeas agreed. Bringing Augeas' son along, Heracles got to work. He started by digging a large ditch through the stables. He then dug trenches leading to the nearby Augeas and Pineos rivers, redirecting their flows through the stables, cleaning them out. When Augeas learned that Eurystheus was the one who had sent Heracles, he refused to give payment, even denying that he had ever offered a reward. Heracles decided to take the matter to a judge, who, after hearing the testimony of Augeas' son, ruled that Heracles would need to be paid. After this, both Heracles and Augeas' son were kicked out of the kingdom. After this, Heracles was sent to Stymphalian to get rid of a flock of man-eating, bronze-beaked birds that were terrorizing a forest in the area. Using a special rattle that had been given to him by Athena and created by Hephaestus, the god of fire and craftsmanship, Heracles was able to scare the birds out of the trees. Once they were in the sky, Heracles shot them down using the arrows he had dipped in the poisonous blood of the Hydra. Next, Heracles was sent to the island of Crete, where there was a violent bull on the loose. The bull had originally been given to King Minos by Poseidon, the god of the sea. It was meant to be a sacrifice to Poseidon, but Minos decided to keep it for himself. Angered, Poseidon sent the bull on a rampage to ravage the lands which Minos ruled over. Of course, that was only after the bull had fathered the Minotaur, which is a weird story that I might cover some other time. After the bull was captured, Eurystheus set it free in Marathon, where it terrorized the city until it was killed by another Greek hero, Theseus. Heracles was next tasked with stealing the mares of Diomedes, king of Thrace. He, along with several volunteers, set out to capture the horses. After Heracles defeated Diomedes' men, he broke the chains that held the mares and brought them down by the sea. Here, he left one of his companions, Abderus, in charge of the mares, while he went to deal with Diomedes. However, unbeknownst to Heracles, these horses were trained to eat the flesh of men. When Heracles returned, he found the mares had overpowered Abderus and consumed him. In an act of revenge, Heracles fed Diomedes to his own horses. Eating the human flesh calmed the horses down enough for Heracles to bind their mouths shut and easily bring them back to Eurystheus. The next task given to Heracles was to steal the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, a tribe of fierce warrior women who are known for their agility, strength, and combat prowess. The belt had been a gift to Hippolyta by her father, Ares, the god of war. Eurystheus wanted to give the belt to his daughter, Admete. Heracles' friends, who realized that he wouldn't be able to fight all of the Amazons by himself, volunteered to accompany him, and they all set sail on a single ship. After getting off the ship in the land of the Amazons, the group were met by Queen Hippolyta herself, who, after speaking with Heracles, promised to give him her belt. However, Hera, disguised as an Amazon warrior, spread a rumor to the rest of the Amazons that the strangers who had arrived were planning on kidnapping Queen Hippolyta. As the Amazon army approached, Heracles realized he was under attack. He slew Hippolyta and took her belt. Then the Greeks fought the Amazons in a great battle. Heracles and his men were able to drive back the Amazons. Then they set sail back to Greece. Heracles' next task took him to the western Mediterranean, far from Greece. He was to steal the cattle of Geryon, a monster with 3 heads and 6 arms. These cattle, whose skins were stained red from the sunset, were guarded by Orthrus, a 2-headed dog. During his journey, as he was crossing the desert, Heracles became so frustrated with the heat that he fired an arrow at Helios. Helios, impressed by the courage of Heracles, sent him a golden cup, which the god used each night to sail from the west to the east. Using this cup boat, Heracles was eventually able to make it to Erythea, which is where Geryon lived, and where Heracles was immediately attacked by Orthrus. Heracles killed Orthrus as well as the cattle herder Eurytion with his club. Then he killed Geryon with one of his poisoned arrows. While Heracles was herding the cattle back to Greece, Hera sent a gadfly to bite the herd, which irritated them to the point where they scattered. It took a full year for Heracles to regather the herd, but he was eventually able to do so and bring them back to Eurystheus, who sacrificed the herd to Hera. After these tasks were complete, Eurystheus claimed that 2 of them didn't count. Heracles had received help from his nephew to kill the Hydra, and he had accepted payment from King Augeas for cleaning out his stables. So Eurystheus came up with 2 additional labors. Heracles' 11th task was to retrieve the golden apples of the Hesperides, and he was able to force the minor god Nereus to tell him the location of the apples. These golden apples, which were sacred to Hera, were guarded by Ladon, a 100-headed dragon who never slept, in a garden that was tended by a group of nymphs. Heracles was unable to gain access to the garden, but he was able to convince the Titan Atlas, who was the father of the nymphs who tended the garden, to retrieve the apples for him. Because Atlas was tasked with holding up the heavens to prevent them from crashing down to the earth, Heracles agreed to temporarily take the burden from Atlas while he went to retrieve the apples. When Atlas returned, he decided to leave Heracles to bear the weight of the heavens. Heracles was able to trick Atlas into taking the burden back by claiming that he would take Atlas's place, but asked that the Titan temporarily take the weight back while he adjusted his cloak to be more comfortable. Atlas Atlas agreed, taking the burden back. Heracles was then free to return to Eurystheus with the golden apples. Eventually, the apples were returned to the nymphs by Athena. The final task was the most daunting. Journey into the underworld and retrieve Cerberus, the three-headed dog who guarded the gates to the underworld. Heracles was able to travel to the underworld, where he sought an audience with Hades, the king of the underworld, the lord of death. Hades said that he would allow Heracles to take Cerberus if he could best the beast without the use of his weapons. Heracles agreed and was able to wrestle control of Cerberus with only his hands. After years of hard work, the labors were finally completed. The stories of Heracles, of course, are not limited to these labors alone. He fought the river god Achelous. He slew the giants Ancilonius and Antaeus. He freed the titan Prometheus and accomplished many other feats. And perhaps we'll go over these in a future video. For now, however, that'll do it for this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps and I really appreciate it. Anyways, remember, be kind, be respectful, and I'll see you next time.